program is another one of our Texas prescribed fire webinar series. You know, as you can see by the title, tonight we are going to be diving into an issue that sits at the heart of prescribed burning, and that's the public side of fire. So everything from smoke consideration, feedback from neighbors and communities, and the broader fire culture we're working to build across the state. So really excited to get into this one. We are recording this, so we'll make sure to post it to the Prescribed Burn Alliance of Texas YouTube channel afterwards, just in case you want to revisit or share it with anyone. And then I will be at some point I'll copy and paste a survey into the chat. And that's just a way for y'all to get us a little bit of feedback. We would love to hear, what you liked about the program, what you didn't like, and, it just helps us, kind of fine tune these programs going forward. But for tonight, we're super fortunate to have two outstanding guest speakers who live in the fire world and, are true champions of both fire and community engagement. And that is Jason Whistler and Glenn Gilman. So I'm gonna change over slides, and here are just kind of some 1,000-foot overviews of who our guest speakers are and their roles, and we're gonna hear from them on some of their vast experience, specifically on the public side of things, and just looking at prescribed fire through their lenses, and hopefully learning a few things. And then the plan is we're going to hear from Jason first, and then open it up to a quick Q&A. And everyone in the chat, once we go into the Q&A session, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll go through them one at a time. And then Jason has to be out of here at 7 p.m. And so at that point, we're going to turn it over to Glenn, and kind of same process. We're going to hear from him, and then go into that Q&A session. So I'm going to make sure, Jason, I'm going to give you co-host capabilities. So in case you do need to share anything, if not, no problem. But without further ado, we'll turn it over to you and hear from you.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank y'all for being here. I do apologize. I did actually have some slides available. I'm originally from Borger, Texas. I'm currently assigned down in Uvalde on the flood response that we got going down here. So I'm away from my desk and don't have access to my slides. So again, I apologize for that. Borger, we started our prescribed fire like probably most people do. Once there's been a need, basically once it's too late. Ours started after the 2006 Amarillo Complex fire. Some of y'all may remember that one. That burned around 980,000 acres in 24 hours. So a very fast moving fire. We approached some of our friends that we worked with the National Park Service. Basically told them we were getting tired of getting our butts kicked by these wildfires and asked what we're doing wrong, to which they politely explained everything. And so that gave us a good starting point. And we revisited from going and dealing with our wildfires from a response role to a more of a proactive role. And we started our mitigation program shortly thereafter. It was not an easy process. It was not fun going before the city council and trying to explain to them that we wanted to catch stuff on fire to stop fire. It took a lot of convincing. Our initial budget, I believe, was around $50,000 a year when they did approve that. And just to give a little contrast, today we're sitting probably closer to 1.5 million. Which incidentally, because of some of the prescribed burn work that we do for private industry around the community, that's $0 to the taxpayer. We actually generate revenue with our prescribed fire program, which allows us to have prescribed firefighters, wildland firefighters on staff working mitigation 365 days a year at zero cost to the taxpayers. So that's something we're very proud of in our program that we've done. A lot of that includes deployments with TIFMAS and other projects, but Um, Anyway, back to the topic at hand. We started out like probably most prescribed fire programs would, mapping out, identifying the primary threat areas. Obviously, we had concerns about the fires. Our predominant winds are out of the west southwest, so we started focusing on the west and southwest sides of the town. Mechanical whenever we can, in some fields, some properties, chemical, and then prescribed fire. Again, and we learned about prescribed fire through asking for help. This wasn't something that we did on our own. We asked for help from experts and we got it, and we became very proficient at it. Um, Part of what I do, also part of my job is arson investigator, wildland fire investigator, and learning and watching prescribed fire and that fire dynamic really enriched my knowledge on learning fire behavior because we weren't responding to it and trying to put it out. We were actually watching it and studying it and learning it. And we were kind of put some good data, stuff that we started sharing with some of the neighboring ranches that we that border up to us. We're very fortunate. The Four Sixes Ranch is one of our best partners, just directly south. They had some great questions and concerns, like the most obvious one is what's this going to do to my fence? And so we dug deep and we found a lot of good research on that the lower BTUs or joules, that the energy release component of these prescribed fires isn't anywhere near the range that's going to damage that fence. And we did a few burns. We studied those burns after time. Months later, and they saw there was no damage, and our prescribed fire program continued. Um, Initially, did we have some complaints from the community? Absolutely. We were the laughing stock of the community for some time. People hated the smoke. It made their clothes out on the clothesline smell bad. Um, it was a literal nightmare at first, and we just had to endure that for some time. Luckily, we're very fortunate to have great city leadership and our city council. They stuck with us and supported the mission because they saw the potential. We saw a few close calls from other jurisdictions and a few close calls in our jurisdiction that really um, help keep that program going. And of course, year after year, that budget slowly increased to allow us to do even more work. On social media, when we'd announce our prescribed burns, there are always the little jokes and comments that, hey, we better make sure we've got our insurance up to date. Border's going to be burning again. And actually, our rebuttal was certain insurance companies like USAA, actually gave discounts for those prescribed firework because that counted towards our Firewise status. And there's some slight insurance benefit for being in a Firewise community. I always like to throw an opportunity that there needs to be more. There needs to be more monetary incentive um, with the other major insurance industries. Um, we created door flyers when we were doing our prescribed burns, and we would hang those on the doors in the areas that could be impacted by smoke. Um, it didn't just talk about it, didn't just notify them of the burn, but on the back side of the flyer, we had a full section dedicated to why we burn, the benefits of prescribed fire, and the threats of the wildfire. So it really made it into an educational campaign instead of just a fire notification. That seemed to buy us quite a bit more community buy-in and support also. Then about 2014, we had the Double Diamond Fire, a little town of Fritch, about 12 miles to our west. And that fire actually was on Mother's Day in 2014. Some of you may have heard it referred to as the Mother's Day Fire. That fire took its toll on the outskirts of the community of Fritch, destroying over 200 structures. Um, we saw a really big significant change in our community stance when they saw that. They were no longer complaining about the smoke. We were starting to get calls, hey, when are you going to come and do some burning around our neighborhood? It eventually evolved into demands. When are you going to get out here and burn this again? The dynamic really changed, I would say, after that 2014 wildfire. Um, And again, it was because it was close to home. I mean, we see it in California and other states all the time. We see the disaster, the impact of wildfire, but once it hits at your neighbor's house, so to speak, it really made a difference. It really helped to get that community buy-in at that point. And since then, I wouldn't say it's been smooth sailing, but it's been the community buy-in has definitely been there and an expected. I will say this is a double-edged sword. We're very, very, very aggressive in our prescribed fire program. The downside to that is the community often tends to be complacent and wants to let us do all the work, and they will typically do a little bit less on their own because their expectation is we're going to take care of them. When we all know when we have the large fires, there's not enough fire trucks to put those out. It takes an individual commitment in the community, and that's probably one of our biggest struggles and what we try to push out quite a bit is trying to get that door-to-door approach, working with property landowners, homeowners that live in the WUI area, and trying to get them to do what they can to, landscaping. For us, it's all surface fire. We don't have the big trees in the Texas Panhandle, so if we can stop the surface fire with landscaping and keeping porches and decks maintained and know where you're stacking your firewood, have something around your wood fence that goes right up underneath those eaves on your house. If we can educate in any of those things, we're going to save even more houses. Um, so before I jump into I was going to talk a little bit about the Windy Deuce Smokehouse Creek fire, but I wanted to pause real quick just to see if there's any questions up to this point.
No questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
so far so good. We'll hear from you, and we'll see what we got at the end.
So the Windy Deuce Smokehouse Creek fire that we had 2024, our next big fire, the Million Acre. The Smokehouse Creek was actually made out of three small fires that formed into a complex. That was north of Borger. The Windy Deuce was creeping up on our western flank, and as I mentioned, with our predominant west winds, that was our biggest threat. About 6 months before this fire, though, we had just completed a 7 mile prescribed burn along the south and western edge of our community. Again, a huge thanks and a huge shout out to the Four Sixes Ranch for letting us do this. We burned a 200-foot swath of land, again, roughly 7 miles long. Um, and that was 6 months before. It had already greened up. I will say, if you guys haven't really watched the cattle or anything before, that livestock loves that area when it starts to green back up. It gives us a sustainability on our burns considerably. Um, it had greened up, and you really couldn't even tell that we had burned it anymore until that wildfire came through. And when it hit that burn scar, it pretty much choked down. And we were actually able to maintain that with one engine as that fire, the Windy Deuce fire, bumped along our southern border. That freed up a ton of resources to be able to work other fires. And it did 100% absolutely save the southern part of our community. We figured out the math. We've been doing that burn now for probably close to 14 years. We've been doing that burn, and this is the first time that we took a direct hit and it paid off. We factored in the man hours of what we've put into that burn year after year after year. Figured out the dollar amount of potential homes that we saved. Our contribution, basically, you've heard of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We found that our mitigation efforts and the property value saved equaled $64. So if people say prescribed fire programs are too expensive, especially in a municipal setting, it costs us $64 a home over that duration, that time period. Um, I think the question isn't, is prescribed fire going to cost too much? I think it's what's it going to cost if you don't do it? Because our loss would have been in the millions had we not done that burn. We've taken a lot of this data and we've been working with Texas Department of Transportation, and we recently completed an agreement with TxDOT to start doing prescribed fire on state right-of-ways. Um, the first one we did um, actually was a huge success. We burned along a strip of Highway 207 south of Borger, about 8 miles long. And we did some studying. We watched it. We looked at it. There wasn't any impact to the barbed wire fence on the Sixes Ranch. During that same time period, we had for 12 months, we had zero highway wildfire ignitions take place. Not a single one. And I think that we're not saying that burning highways is, the key, the golden ticket, but we all know that wildfires start off highways. You can look on any fire map anywhere, and it's just common knowledge. But the fact that we made 12 months without any wildfires starting along that strip of highway, I think it deserves more study. I think it deserves a closer look. That's something that we're trying to solicit also, is to get more buy-in and helping us to push this, advance this a little bit further. We'd like some more independent studies, even through AgriLife, just to help us to quantify this, because it would mean a lot more than just the city of Borger saying, "Hey, look what we did." We want real, actual validation of this and see if this is something that we need to be looking at, because we see wildfires year after year, and we always say the same thing. We got to do something different. And that's what we're doing, is we're trying to propose something different. If all goes well later this year, probably into next year at this point, our next proposal will be about 20 miles of burning off a state highway to the east of our community, to help protect our neighbors. So that might be a good opportunity to bring in some more studies and research on this. But the TxDOT Highway Maintenance Manual, which is a very exciting read, by the way, is about a third, of that document geared toward reducing invasive species, restoring the native species in the habitat. And that's something that we all know that prescribed fire does well. So prescribed fire isn't authorized in their manual, but it's not prohibited either. And so we found that gray area when we engaged in that agreement. But the prescribed burn project is viable. We had to do a lot of education. We had to show them what that ground stubble looks like during a prescribed fire, because they're concerned, and I'm not faulting TxDOT. They're not firefighters. They're not in the fire industry. Their mindset is, they've seen what happens when wildfires burn through and it moonscapes the entire area and you're left with fighting sand dunes. Well, that's a wildfire. Prescribed fire, you're still going to have grass stubble. You're not going to have the erosion component that you would think that you would have. You're burning, of course, less wind, higher humidity. Everything that we needed to document was easily accomplished on one of our other burns. Showed them the data, and after probably about a year's worth of discussions, they did consent to that. And again, this would be another project that we'd really like to see some more studies on. And again, looking for partners that might be interested in doing this with us and helping look at the results, because I do think it could be a game changer. Obviously, as an emergency manager, my focus is largely on response and recovery. I do work in the mitigation area quite a bit, but um, for us, prescribed fire is a tool to defend against wildfires, and that's how we use it. I know there's a lot of different agricultural benefits to it, and I apologize if anybody chimed in on this. It's a rancher and just wants to learn more about how fire can work on the ranch, but best I can give you is my personal experience, and that's how we use it for preventing these devastating wildfires in the region. Um,
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. It's so cool to hear about it. I mean, I feel like Borger is, that y'all are like heroes across the state, and really in the spotlight for wildfire prevention with prescribed fire. So it's really cool to hear, more. And at this point, anyone can start dropping questions in the chat, but I'll just fire one off, right off the bat. The projects with TxDOT and expanding, the burns off, highways and whatnot. How I guess, what all goes into that and how, what are the barriers to expanding that, outside of just the Borger community, to, perhaps, a statewide scale. I'm sure there's, a bunch of hurdles to actually implementing those.
Yeah, there is. And unfortunately, the first burn went pretty good. There's a lot of TxDOT support, a lot of buy-in. They were intrigued by it. Since then, we've run into some obstacles, especially as we talk about doing bigger, more complex burns. Now we're talking about having to bring in pilot cars and everything you would expect basically in a construction zone. Again, not faulting TxDOT in any way, shape, or form. It's just the fact that, this isn't their area of expertise. They don't look at right-of-ways as something to be used to help prevent wildfires. We're hoping to change that. The process consisted of a lot of photographs and convention the local regional office, getting them on board, letting them see the data. I mean, and that's really what we had to do is send them emails, send them pictures. Hey, look, here's what's left with this burn we just did on the sixes. Here's the prescription that we burned in. The wind was at X, the humidity was X, the temperature was this. Showing them the ground stubble that was left after those burns. Um, the erosion factor was our biggest concern by far. And so we were able to alleviate that. The agreement wasn't fun to work through, but it really, I think once we finally got it down to Austin and got it signed off, we opened a door. We hope to keep that door open. We could use community support throughout whatever district or region that your viewers are in. Again, not supporting Borgers, but hey, let's just approach TxDOT. Let's talk to our legislators. Let's talk to our elected officials and get people interested. That's all we're asking. We're not saying this is the magic bullet. We're not saying that our 200-foot boundary that we put in on the Four Sixes Ranch is the magic bullet either. It just it did stop the fire from hitting our community. We're just trying to challenge people to be more interested and do their own follow-up.
Definitely, definitely. Uh, Going to the chat here. Is Borger's story available for purchase or download? I think if I'm understanding the question right, I know AgriLife partnered with y'all on a publication that, kind of detailed the success of your prescribed burn and, the wildfire mitigation work y'all have, and that is a free download. I'll share that with everyone via email. Please correct me if I misinterpreted the question. The next one was, how did you get the community buy-in to do prescribed burning? I'm a graduate student doing research on prescribed burning in Kansas.
Yeah, so again, it really was not easy. There were some pretty tense moments a few times. Some landowners were not happy about it. Some property owners were not happy about it. It was not really until they started to see the benefit. And, keep in mind, during the time when we started doing our prescribed fires, we would get between 70 to 90 wildfires a year in our response area. So wildfires are very common. Now, granted, a lot of those are ditch fires, and smaller fires, but the quantity was high. So we're no stranger to fires. It took perseverance. It took a lot of public education, public information, putting the information out there, and then ultimately, once we had the Double Diamond fire over in Fritch, and our poor neighbors over there lost those 200 plus structures. That really hit home. So the same way that our prescribed fire started out, the '06 Amarillo Complex fire, it took literally getting our butts kicked and having just a near catastrophe before we changed the way that we did. And I think that's human nature, unfortunately. But that's part of why we're very grateful for this opportunity to share our story because a smart person learns from their mistakes, a wise person learns from others. So we're hoping that other people can learn from our trials and our experiences and come up with their own programs.
Definitely. What are the requirements that go into the Firewise USA recognition?
So they changed that. That's been changed since we became a Firewise USA city. We were actually the first city to become Firewise. No other city had tried it before. Those are typically done by HOAs and communities. Um, there is an in-kind contribution that you have to have. It's based on the number of residents that live in your community. I'm probably going to refer to the Texas A&M Forest Service or Firewise USA for the current updates on it. I can say that we've been grandfathered in. If we ever lost our status as Firewise, we would not be able to get it back as a city. So we kind of fell into a unique loophole. Like I said, this is going back, and I honestly don't remember when we became Firewise at this point, but um, it's a process of in-kind contributions. We log hours that when the community members come and dispose of their limbs in our limb pile refuge. We have community cleanup days. A lot of it is just the budgetary aspect that goes into. I say it's an in-kind contribution. You can also have a direct contribution. So when our fire crews are out spending, 150,000 doing a prescribed burn, those funds count towards the Firewise recertification process. And Texas A&M Forest Service has been really great partners working with us on that.
Right. I guess question just for me is, is there, or y'all's program, is there, specific metrics y'all are trying to meet, on a yearly basis, or, if there's, times of, extreme drought, are y'all doing, more than you would another year, or, what do your projects look like, when you're planning them out?
So Colby Medeiros and Archie Stone are two primary wildland firefighters back in the city. They do an amazing job at keeping up with the maps. We have all of our units mapped out. They can tell you by looking at it at a glance if it's a burn unit, a mow unit. We talk a lot about fire, but not everything is fire. There's a lot of other ways to mitigate those risks. And when we have a area that we can mow, we mow it. But we know that it's the same thing that TxDOT runs into. After you mow for a while, all you're doing is arranging that fuel. It's going from vertical fuel to horizontal fuel, and it's still receptive to embers. After a while, that decadent layer builds up, and you have to burn it. So that's something that we do. Um, Jumping in, one of the next questions, just to add into it, how often do we burn the 4.6s? The same as we would our other mow units, probably about every probably 3 to 5 years. We probably burn those units. Just depending on the fuel loading. Obviously, if they've got a lot of cattle and they're grazing and there's not as much of that fuel loading in there, it's going to be a longer duration. Since the Windy Doo Smokehouse Creek fire, we've been burning that annually because there's a public perception that goes along with that because it did save the city. So we weren't going to miss opportunity to do a back-to-back burn on that one. The rest of the units in town, though, like I said, they're mapped out. They're on GIS. When the guys are out doing mitigation work, they're logging it using field maps, and they literally work 365 days a year. They're out all year round doing mitigation work.
Have you seen, neighboring communities or cities, building up their own fire program, or what's
We've we've
the
seen we've
progress?
seen some success, and part of what we do also is working with the Wildland Fire Academy. It's kind of a three-pronged attack. So first we have the fire summit. We meet with a bunch of the area fire chiefs. We talk about the training we need. We try to get that training put on, and keep in mind this training is academic. A lot of that training, though, requires field experience. So, what better way to get free labor? Reach out and work with your wildland fire academies. Those guys just took their ENOP, their engine operator, their firing boss. They need some field time. They need time out running that drip torch. We get them out on our fires. That's free labor for us. It's experience for them, ink in their task book. And at the same time, we're getting the burns done, giving them that real world experience that they need. So that's one of the things we do. It helps out quite a bit, and we do get some of the ranches involved. A lot of the ranches have fire programs themselves. We have the 4.6s ranch. Crutch Ranch, right next to us also, and they're a registered fire department, ranch fire department, and we work with them very, very closely. Um, Let me see. Do the ranch employees help on the burns? Sometimes they do. Honestly, it just depends on if they're busy. But that those prescribed burn practices and the tactics that we use in prescribed fire are the same tactics we're going to use in a wildfire. It's just in different environmental conditions. So, yeah, I think it's really important to have those members involved in those other fire departments. Amarillo recently, not real recently, but a while back when Amarillo started working on their fire mitigation program, they were concerned about doing it in their town. We were confident enough in our community on fire at this point. We invited the Amarillo Chiefs and their wildland fire team over to Borger and let them conduct prescribed fire in the city of Borger. Of course, their chiefs were fine letting them drag jump torches in our community, just not theirs. But that's what it took to get their chiefs comfortable with it, and they were able to take that back to Amarillo. Fritz Stinnett near us now, they're involved in fire mitigation. And now Archie and Colby, Archie Stone, he teaches at Wildland Fire Academies all over the state now and has done a really good job at trying to help bring information about prescribed fire and other tactics to other communities.
Right? Uh, do you, off the top of your head, is there, you know, I know it goes back to, maybe '06 or whenever it really got started, but are there any kind of lessons learned, that you could think of off the top of your head where it's, maybe something y'all tried that you would have done differently or, something that, maybe, hurt y'all with the community or has it, I mean, because it's not always all smooth sailing, obviously, but is there anything you can
It's
think of?
Yeah, it's not all smooth sailing. I mean, we did have an injury of a firefighter, a couple of firefighters on a prescribed burn. It was outside of our area. It was in an area that had quite a bit more PJ in it, and it was actually a fire whirl that got him, not the fire itself. But um, I mean, so yeah, there's going to be unfortunate events, but ultimately the risk reward. I mean, even though it was sad that we had a couple of firefighters get injured. Um, the fact is that in the long run, and looking at it in hindsight, we still saved millions of dollars of property, on other burns that we've done in the community. So, all in all, we've been very blessed and very fortunate, and the I would say it's been 98% success rate. The only downside I see is obviously we try to mitigate the smoke and keep, but we just don't get the north winds and the fire, the rest of the fire prescription good enough to where we can burn and blow that smoke away from the community. We'd love it if we could, and we try, we really do, but that's not always realistic. So sometimes that smoke's just going to have, it is a fact that it's going to impact the residents. But since we've been doing all this, the complaint department has gone down dramatically because the community sees the benefit. I credit our public information team for a lot of that and our city council for standing with us and supporting it.
My last question was you mentioned when the 2024 fires came, you said y'all just had one engine and were able to, kind of keep the fire at bay with that. Uh, During that time, are the other, fire suppression, the other engines, are they on standby in Borger patrolling or are they,
Oh
were they
no,
sent out to other?
they were engaged on other parts of the fire because remember, it was the Windy Deuce fire that impacted Borger. We started the Million Acre Smokehouse Creek fire directly to our north. So there was plenty of fire for everybody there wasn't any idle time that day.
Right.
There was more fire, way more fire than we had firefighters. But I can promise you, had that burn scar not been in there and been fresh enough, and again, I'm talking 6 months, so that's not a real fresh burn scar for our type of fuel type that we have up here, which is basically just grass. Um, It'd have been a whole different story. We wouldn't have had enough fire trucks to have stopped it. But the way it was with that Burns car, we literally kept it in check with one engine.
Incredible. Well, again, I think y'all are like celebrities, when it comes to talking about wildfire mitigation, and any chance we get to talk about Borger is always really exciting. And want to make sure everyone with any last questions for Jason, please, put them in the chat while we have him here. But if there are no more questions, then at this point, I'm going to go ahead and get Glenn Gilman here. I'm gonna make sure, Glenn, I'm just made you co-host for sharing capabilities. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Let's
Thank you,
see.
everybody, and thank you, David. Thank you, Glenn.
Jason, thank you so much. Okay, let's see.
All right.
All right, Glenn, I got you loud and clear.
See if I can. There it is.
Perfect. I can see your presentation.
All right, you got it there.
Yes, sir. We're ready for you.
Well, I can't see anyone now, but so it goes. All right, so yeah, really great conversation. So I work here in the Austin Travis County area. Um, we're kind of a unique area. We have a very strong fire culture, at least on the agency side. So been working in this area since 96. In that time, some rough records are around 60,000 acres having been burned, about 600 burns total, half dozen different agencies. So that's kind of the cumulative experience I have that I'll be discussing today. For us, burning in Travis County, with Austin right in the middle of it, burning is just wildland urban interface burning to some different degree. So kind of built the program, National Cohesive Strategy. When you're talking about burning in the wildland urban interface, you've got all pieces of it, right? So we're burning for the community, for resilient landscapes. The only reason we can burn in this area is because we have safe, effective wildfire response. And then we're doing it for the community. So all of these are audience that I'm communicating with as I get my prescribed burn projects built. So I spent about a dozen years with the federal government working in rural environments in the Nature Conservancy. So in '06, I moved to Travis County and spent the past 20 years managing programs here with different groups. Like I said, it's a very interagency based cooperative. We all follow the National Wildfire Coordinating Group standards to some degree, make it clear that those standards cover everything from fire planning to the human dimensions to fitness. It's just good research based material for folks. We kind of get hung up on the qual system, and that's only a small part of it. But that's kind of what's happening. This is a quick map of one of our projects. If you see that, that's our east west is Highway 71. To the west is the Austin Airport. North south is Loop 130. To the north of us is a water treatment plant, a power plant, and the Tesla Gigafactory. To the south is 3 schools and multiple communities. So this is the context we're operating in, is we're putting up smoke with all those receptors. So that really gets to the difference of burning here in an urban environment. Burning in a rural environment, I've done that plenty. What happens here is we have a lot of smoke receptors. We have a lot of reporting parties. So these are people that can see your smoke. So when you're burning on 71, everybody driving on 71 is trained to report smoke. And then there's a lot of interested parties, so both public and private. So those are the differences. I like to kind of make sure we think about complexity and risk. So if I'm burning a patch of grass, the complexity doesn't change a lot whether I'm in a rural environment or an urban environment. The risk changes quite a bit. So just recognize that the complexity that I manage oftentimes is just pre-burn complexity in communicating with the public. There's a little bit of operational change just because we're dealing with smoke dispersion, but really I'm increasing my risk way more than my complexity generally in this environment. I operate on this idea of people don't want to be surprised. People are generally much more gracious if they know you've done something and made an honest mistake and have met you before. And then you can influence individual and agency reactions to negative outcomes. We're not going to be 100% successful in prescribed fire. We'll have failures. And if we can set ourselves up to see some grace in others in those situations, we'll be able to sustain programs over time. So I talked about the challenge of smoke receptors reporting parties. I got receptors in all directions, so I can't avoid them all. So I do simple smoke screening. Folks that are most sensitive or closest, I try and reduce the impacts. The other ones, I'm looking at mitigating that by sharing what exactly is going to happen and why it's important. And then the smoke's visible to a large number of individuals and it'll be reported. So in our instance, we probably have 20,000 or more people that can see our smoke at any one point. They're all potential calls to 911. So we need to manage that relationship with the dispatch office. I heard a ding.
Oh, you're good. That's just someone joining the webinar.
Okay. So I design my units based on the smoke impacts like I just described. Can't avoid them all. We do a lot of size limiting. So when I first started here, we would burn 500 acres south of town. What we found was 2 hours later, we'd be getting calls from the west side of town out by the lake complaining about smoke. So I've limited my fire size quite a bit now, partially to manage smoke and partially to manage the time frame that the smoke's produced in. Minimize activity fuels. We like to see rapid change in systems. I minimize the amount of mechanical work I do with the idea that it produces a lot of smoke. So activity fuels are anything that we produce by mechanical or chemical means. I have a fairly complicated fuel system. I have lives, I got grass, I got shrubs, I got timber. All these things are in there. You add activity fuels, it's just another thing you have to predict what's going to happen. And so activity fuels can be a challenge to predict. Smoke dispersion. So what I do is burn. I don't meet all my targets, and then I can introduce activity fuels later over time after I've established a rapport with the neighbors. We look to create a portfolio of burns. So if I have receptors to the south of or to the north of a project, I'm kind of tied to north winds, except, shoulder seasons, I might find something. So because we're burning in a really tight burn windows, what I don't want to do is have only one burn or two burns that all need a due northeast wind to be successful, because that's a hard win for us to get. So I create a portfolio with the idea that my high priority project is that one with that tight window northeast wind, but I have a half dozen other projects ready to go so that if I can't get that northeast wind, I'm ramped up with resources. I've told the public what's happening. I have an alternative. And this allows us to really meet our targets because we're not canceling because we can't hit this narrow window for smoke dispersion. Real careful plan development, and then I follow them religiously. I find the public really likes to be told what's going to happen, and then they see that happen. It's a very powerful tool when you ask to do something a second time, because you set the expectation that you will tell them what will be done, and it will be done that way. And then I like that the lead-in talked about a fire culture. We talk a lot about plans and projects. I focus on programs. So this is a program. I need to make sure that I can burn again. That's my highest priority for every project I do. Can I burn again? Will it make easier for another burn manager to burn again? So I work on that continually, consciously building the program, because then the projects will follow. This is just to recognize that we can do things legally, but they may not be supported. Where does the public land? I have come to find that the public is pretty neutral to positive about prescribed burns. When we first started, we would send out a postcard to every neighbor within 2 miles of our burns. So over 6 years, I sent out 45,000 postcards. I got 100 responses. About 10 of those were negative. Those people would have been mad if I didn't burn. They just wanted to be mad. There was another 10 that were folks with COPD, kids with asthma, folks that had real health concerns that could be aggravated by smoke. But inevitably, they would say, we support what you're doing. Just call us so we can leave. And the other 80 in that data set were just, hey, let me know you're burning because I'm interested. So bottom line for me, the public is pretty neutral to positive. But what you have to recognize is that the public representatives and public agencies aren't the same thing. So even if the public's positive, it doesn't necessarily mean your fire department's positive. Fire's a threat. They're built to suppress fire. And so it can be a real challenge to communicate that message. But the public representatives, just like was stated in Borger, have been tremendously powerful tools or partners for us, and that they've established this fire culture and continue to help us sustain it. I will say here, public entities have a narrow purpose and narrow comms channels. So that's really just to communicate. What we're trying to do with Prescribed Fire is build a community and an all-encompassing effort. And most public agencies have very defined roles. The biggest challenge you'll find is just recognize that when you communicate with the fire chief, that doesn't mean that everyone in the fire department gets that message or that other departments in the city got the message. So just recognize the communication channels and public entities are not necessarily well integrated with one another. My go-tos is knowing the laws, rules, and regulations better than the regulators. So I know the TCEQ standards in and out. They've tried to shut me down multiple times, but the law is a powerful thing. So I've always managed to argue that I do have the right to do things that are unpopular oftentimes. Likewise, knowing your business and communicating it simply, and do that over and over. The other thing to recognize is that our elected officials and often department heads turn over fairly rapidly. And so it's an exhausting process, but you need to re-educate a commissioner's court or a city council every 2 years, if not continually. And that's a conscious process through our program development, is make sure they know we exist and what we're doing. And then documenting everything. So every conversation I have, every presentation I have, I document who I spoke to, when it was. In the end, the burn boss is responsible for everything about that prescribed burn, on-site, off-site, and that is until the fire is physically out. Not just when you say it's out, but when it's actually out. In Texas, our regulations are pretty limited, so there's very little you're required to do from a prescribed burn standpoint. And most of your complaints are managed, or most smoke regulations are largely managed through complaints. And so there's some disagreement within my area. Some people don't notify TCEQ because they're not required to. I've always notified TCEQ because it's the best practice in my mind. And I'll tell you, inevitably what happens is I have my local TCEQ rep. I include them in all my email communications. And what I find is when I burn, I get a call from TCEQ maybe 10% of the time. It's usually when the head fire is going up or the smoke column's building, and they call to say, hey, what's happening? We're getting some calls. I tell them, yep, that's the head fire. Within an hour, there should be very little smoke. And that is the grace we're looking for in folks, because they don't have the hassle of trying to figure out who it is that's burning, where it is, all of that, because they have my number already. They know I'm doing it. It's an easy call for them. Then they can go talk to their constituents, their leadership, or whatever. It's the same with the fire department as well. Is if they know it's happening, they know who to contact, and generally you see more grace from them when you have a challenge. So again, making sure TCEQ knows, that fire departments know, particularly those dispatch systems, because they get overwhelmed, and then the neighbors. That's kind of the overview, kind of my bigger programmatic viewpoint, how I built the program and sustained the program. Here's just really quick. I don't do very involved modeling. There's a lot available now. I encourage folks to look into it. I do the old simple smoke screening. Here's where I want to put the smoke, 30-degree vector on either side, and kind of plan from there. We've talked about it. We can't avoid all receptors. We look at proximity and sensitivity, make decisions based on that. Time periods are important. We have a tendency to focus on the burn period, but a lot of challenges occur overnight, so we make sure that we plan smoke dispersion both during the burn day and overnight. And then we have additional burn periods. And so for us, in a visible location, those additional burn periods are particularly important, and is the overnight. If you burn in a rural area, the middle of a ranch, you can leave, you get it contained. It can burn out over multiple days and multiple nights, and nobody can see it. We're burning along roadways and parks, and so we have to do quite a bit of mitigation for that overnight and during initial burn periods, just to keep the public complaints down. When I'm communicating, I talk quite a bit about volume. So if we say smoke, that means a lot of different things. And so I typically think about communicating on-site and off-site nuisance. Who's going to be bothered by it because it's a hazy smoke and maybe there's a smell or odor? That's one thing. We also think about smoke and the volume of smoke and visibility of it for call volumes to the dispatch centers. And then we talk about the real things, which are visibility and health impacts. But it's important to kind of, when you're communicating with folks, is clarify what type of smoke you're talking about, because the public is only thinking about the smoke they see on TV that's super dense and dangerous. And a lot of our smoke is just nuisance smoke that'll pass over time. Like I said, communication is my biggest tool because I can't avoid all receptors. I have a pretty involved process. And so my pre-burn notifications, recommended versus required. There's very few required notifications for RX burns, but I have a tremendous list of recommended, or ones that I choose. I start my communications a minimum of 6 weeks ahead of time. This is where I'm telling folks, both required and recommended, hey, we're looking to burn in the next 6 weeks to 2 months, this location, this is what you can expect, why. Let me know if you have concerns and questions. And this gives me 6 weeks to work through any concerns. I usually notify folks, the whole group, 6 days ahead of time. Hey, we're looking to burn sometime next week. And we do that through press releases, social media posts. We're really big on redundancy. So those are big, broad goals. But to get redundant, we have these little signs we put in the neighborhoods, exits to communities, where we say, hey, we're going to be burning in your area. If you've got questions, call. And then there's the phone and email tracks. So I reach out to certain individuals, HOAs. All of this is documented when I post the signs, when I make the calls or send the emails. Truthfully, I get very little response to all this effort. Really what it is in my mind is, each time I burn, most of these folks get 3 communications from me. We're looking to burn. We're burning today. Thanks. We had a great burn. And so that's kind of the process. And if you think about the 8 years I spent with Travis County Parks, the county commissioners got 300 emails from me in that time, basically saying what I was doing, why I was doing it, and what the outcomes were. So they got very comfortable with what this program was doing. Burn day notifications are very specific. Those are typically tied towards emergency services. And then I like to send out a post-burn communication.
Yeah, that's why I said that. I said, oh, they got a football. So I saw
Somebody's on.
that.
Post-burn communication, people are letting you do this. This is your social license. I like to wrap that up with a comment about, hey,
No, they both messaged me separately.
this is what we got
They
done.
messaged me separately.
David, are you hearing that?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and mute that. Let me see. Sorry about that.
Is there anything in the comments we need to talk about?
No, not yet. I have a few questions for you, but I'll let you finish your presentation before I
Okay.
start peppering you.
Yeah, no, sounds good. You can see my list of contacts there. There's the required government, neighborhood contacts. I try and do that via email just because there's a lot of them. Try and let them know what their potential to be impacted is. Is it going to be dense smoke on the roadway, drift smoke? I notify folks that have the potential to report. So again, big, broad areas. And I'll go back to the sign posting. The other thing we do post is road signs. So we, at a minimum, put signs on roads that are going to be impacted by the smoke. So that's 2. And then we can have anywhere from 2 to 6 more at different roads adjacent to it just to reduce the number of reports. And then there's always the potential to call anyway. There's people that I call because I know they're going to call me. So I just get to them before they call me. We talked about road signs. Those might need to be moved at night. Smoke monitors. Do you have somebody as the burn boss? Do you have somebody that can see where the smoke is a mile down the road? So oftentimes in these environments, as the burn boss, I may be on site or I might be loosely assigned and I'm doing the smoke monitoring. But I typically want to get somebody off the burn site and on the road to document with a camera what conditions are at different points. Do you plan for night dispersion and having the ability to be visible and or close or flag a road at night? Smoke dispersion, I talked about it before. It might need to be a multi-stage project. And so sometimes we will go through a treatment process where we'll do a thinning prescription and we may pile burn before we do our broadcast. We might do multiple stages of thinning till we get it to the fuel load we want, where we can safely and confidently conduct a prescribed burn. Scheduling, obviously for us, my design is really designed so that we start after everyone's at work and we try and finish before everyone leaves for the commuting hour. And so for us, 2 o'clock is when elementary schools get out. So if we're burning near an elementary school, we want to be done before 2. Most people get on the road and start commuting around 4. We want to get our head fire up and out by 4. So we don't lean towards the traditional burn period because of smoke management. We typically burn earlier in the burn period just to get smoke up and out before we get a lot of calls. And then one of the main functions for me in this is really the timing of the project. So I'm pushing my firing bosses to take some risks with spots because that's easier to deal with than a smoke management problem overnight. And so there's a lot of work on my end just to make sure the design is good and the crews are functioning well so that we're going to meet the timing when we want the head fire up and out, and then the rest of the fire can ventilate before the inversion sets in. We talked a little bit about mop-up planning, so I'm worried about volume, but the visibility is a big thing for us. So if we're going to get calls all night because people see fire near a road, and this could be miles away that they can still see this but are still calling. So we're worried about that. and then recognizing in the duration. So in the winter, we don't have to sit on a fire very long, but there's instances in the summer where we've been mopping up 2 weeks post operation just to minimize nuisance calls to dispatch, because the fire service has to drive out to check on a smoke report, even if they're fairly confident it's one of our burns. Something we do a lot of is bone piling. So we're mopping up and reducing smoke as we burn. So on the perimeter, particularly, the crews are kind of trained not to spray things out, but just pile them up, get them burning, get them burned hot, and get it out of there before sundown. So that's one of the ways we just mitigate fuels, and it's gets to the point of obsession with crews. It's funny to see. And then patrol planning. So when you're in the patrol status, what are people supposed to look for? Is it a growing column? Is it visible flames? Combination of the two, so they know when to call with a concern. Visibility. So lots of times we'll patrol just to ease the neighborhood. So if we're burning behind a neighborhood, even though our fire might be contained at 3 in the afternoon, we will roll trucks around there well into the night just to show the public sees that we're still out there. And then the duration of the patrols, those could go on for weeks. Basically, my philosophy there is I want to be the first one to see a problem on my prescribed burn. Again, trying to get the good grace of the responding department. I want to be the person that calls to say there's a problem in my project, not get a call from the fire department saying, hey, you need to get out here because there's a problem. These are just the things that I found over time are important. After about a half mile, we don't get much smoke problems. If you've got heavy fuels, burning in the summer allows for much greater dispersion. In the winter, if we get 4,000 or 5,000 feet, that's a bang up day. We can get 7,000 to 10,000 feet in the summer. So if we've got heavy fuel loads, summer's a better option for us. This is where I talked about limiting my fire size. So I kind of work backwards. How long will this project take to be done by my target endpoint, and then figure out how big that can be. So for us, generally, I like to keep my burns under 100 acres. I can go up to 150. Likewise with timber and shrub burns, if I can get them under 10, that's great. I can go up to 15 or 20. But this is basically a 4-hour operational window. I can start at anywhere between 11 and be done, between 2 and 3. You can see I like to have my burns done by 2 to 3 in the winter. That gives me 2 hours of ventilation after the fact. And then I can push that back to about 1,700 in the summer because of the longer day length. Recognize burning near lakes reduces your smoke dispersion predictability. Smoke tends to drop over lakes, and so there's a lot less predictability there. And then our production over night. So if we don't get much smoke after one operational period in the winter, so the next day, a little bit of smoke, it usually won't last into the next day. But in the summer, we can have easily 3 days of smoke and up to 2 weeks or more. So that's something we plan for and have to address. I really like this guide for prescribed fire in southern forests. If you can get a hold of a copy, I think there's PDF copies. It's got a lot of good practical guidance geared towards southern forests, but it's really good stuff. The outdoor burning in Texas TCU document definitely need to be well understood. And then just make sure we recognize the EPA is working with us. Air quality and prescribed fire have conflicting objectives, but the EPA is doing a pretty good job working with the community, as is TCEQ, to make sure we continue to be able to do this type of work. And that's part of our social license, in that we're burning responsibly, so these people don't take the heat and then have to come down on us. And just so you know, NWCG has a lot of good documentation. So I think the smoke guide's been updated recently. All of these are documents done by the NWCG Smoke Committee. A lot of professionals put a lot of good information in here. So I'd recommend looking at the NWCG site, publications that are available. There's a lot of good information out there. And then this is my contact information. So this is who I'm working for now. You saw by my resume, I've worked for a half dozen entities. So my boundaries are pretty loose. Anything I can do to help folks get a burn on the ground, I'd be happy to do so. That's what I.
Glenn,
You ready for any
that
questions?
yeah, I was just saying that was incredible, and I have so much respect for you because I think we all know how hard it is to implement a burn out in the middle of nowhere, but much less when you're surrounded by a city of million of people and growing rapidly. So that's just incredible. We do have questions in the chat, so I'll start sending them over to you. Trey asked if you ever burn or consider burning in a burn ban.
Yeah, so that's an important thing. So we can't meet our targets by just burning in the winter or just in the summer or outside of a burn ban. So that's been a aggressive effort on our parts over the years to continue to chip away at that. But yeah, I did some numbers and I'm trying to remember. I think it was about a 50-50 split in the 8 years I was Travis County Parks. I was around 100 burns, and about half of them were in burn bans, half outside of burn bans. I have the TDA exemption if I choose to use it, but I typically don't put that there. We work with them. The most important thing I got was, almost all of our summer burns would be in a burn ban. So summer gets really locked out. Our best effects are in the burn ban. So yeah, we do burn in a burn ban, but it's not easy and it takes continual reinforcement and re-education.
Question from Philip. How has the increase in development in your area affected your burns?
So I haven't had to quit burning at any location because of new receptors. I am anxious to get burns on the ground as quick as I can to establish that we've been burning there before the development. So we'll have parks that are clearly going to get developed. And so I'm trying to establish a burn program before they build communities. We're getting a lot of data centers in now, and I don't know what that's going to do because we're not data, but logistics centers. And so I don't know what a commercial business is going to be like burning by because most of it's been residential. So no changes to what we've done. A focused effort on trying to make sure we establish our right and process ahead of the development is really what our goals are now.
Awesome. Question from Michael. It was a reference to something you said earlier when you said, your portfolio of fires. That meaning that you just have multiple fire opportunities in one area for, when or if conditions align?
Yeah, so I've kind of moved from we used to have a winter and a summer season. What I've gone to now is I just want projects ready all the time. So because our seasons are so strange, like June used to not be a very good burn month for us. Now some years it's a great burn month. And so trying to make sure there's a portfolio. And so when I say portfolio, I want a combination of north and south winds, high and low fuel loads, high and low complexity, and so that I can match, okay, I got all the resources next week, which units are going to be in prescription, as opposed to having all the resources ready and no unit prepped with the right prescription. So that's really the way I look at it now, is having different projects with different needs ready to go at any one time so I can take advantage of opportunities. The classic example is getting a north wind in August. If you can be ready for a north wind in the growing season, you can do a bang up job on a unit that's always a winter burn.
Definitely. This one was a direct message to me, but it was referencing, so it said it was mentioned to contact the Wildland Fire Academy for training. How does that work for Central Texas? And do they have a need for private lands to work on those certifications?
So most of our projects have been on public lands. So different public. Travis County is unique. We got 80,000 acres of 20% of our county is publicly owned. So that's unique in the state of Texas. That's where most of this work happens. I'm working now to try and develop a program where we're doing more work on private land. So again, if we're looking at mitigation, which is one of the roles I have, we've got to get that on private lands. So what we do now is we operate mostly as agency folks. We have interlocals, so people help one another. Outside of a few agencies, there's not a lot of volunteering or private lands work right now. But we're trying to move onto the private lands. Well, what has happened now is the fire departments are much more interested in prescribed fire and getting the training. So we're seeing the need to expand the land base we're operating on. So a park can only, there's only so many burns you can do on a park that are within ecological bounds, but there's a ton of country out there that needs prescribed burning. So we're trying to utilize relationships with the fire departments that have some nexus with those landscapes because, right, they're in their districts and they should be managed properly so they get the right fire regimes. So trying to build that so that it becomes a fire department kind of initiative to do work on private lands to improve their fuels conditions and the training opportunities for the fire departments. Does that answer that?
Yeah, I think so. If it didn't, please follow up in the chat and let us know. I guess this question is just for me. Burning in a place like Austin and navigating the social side of burning. So when there's the fires in Bastrop, right? Did you receive pressure, whether that's internally in y'all's group or from the city or just the outstanding public? Did you receive a lot of pressure to scale back on your fire activity, for a little while things calmed down, or did that not really affect you?
For the Bastrop fire?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. So it points to culture to some degree. And so the west side of Travis County is kind of evenly split between western Edwards Plateau, Hill Country, the eastern parts, Blackland Prairie, and associates itself to some degree with the Bastrop community. And so what you find is a culture that's kind of western Travis County, and then the eastern Travis County culture is tied more towards Bastrop. So you find a lot more concern, I think, on the Bastrop County side of the county with prescribed burning because they've had such a history of bad fires. But
Yeah.
we're burning in grasslands, they're burning in timber. It's a whole different fuel system, but it's a recognition again of what your community and audiences are. And we've been burning on the west side of the county since 1996. The first burn on the east side county was probably 2012. So there's not a long history of burning on the east side of Travis County. So it took a little work to get there. I
Yeah.
will say when we had there was an escape prescribed fire in Bastrop, we were burning again within 6 months of that. So we made a conscious effort and worked with all the agencies to say, look, that was a terrible event, but it doesn't change how we do our work. It doesn't change the risk or complexity of our work. It's just one of those things that happen. So yeah, we had a concerted effort with a lot of media out there, probably a dozen media outlets. And that was the purpose of the burn. I got the short straw, so I got to host it, but everybody was out there. We knew how important it was. And we did a bang up job and we got the process moving again.
That's great. That's great. Question from Trey asking if there's any sort of cool maps of the burns you've done.
Trey, you can drop me a note and I can see what I can find. So yeah, we do. Like I said, there's a half dozen agencies, so we've got projects spread all across Travis County. I think they have built a timestamp so you can see, over time when they pop up. And Balcones Canyonlands has probably the most robust burns program in our area, and they've burned a ton since '95.
Very good. And then this question, thinking, in my role, it's the group I work with the most is, the Prescribed Burn Association. So if, an association is in or around, an urban area anywhere in Texas, right? And, if they're, I guess, either nervous about, conducting burns or, from a, recruitment standpoint, trying to get, people into fire, is there any, big takeaways or advice that you could give just in short about how they should approach just even getting into it?
It's interesting because I always say, like, what's it take to create a burn program for me? And it starts with a burn boss that's really willing to take risks and put the effort in. Because on any and every burn day, there's a half dozen or more reasons not to do it. So your job as a burn boss is really just to overcome all the easy no's, right? The wind's not quite right. The fuel's not quite right. So and so doesn't want to do it. The fire chief, it just goes on. And you got to figure out ways to do that. Then for me, it's a manager that allows me to do it. So for the private burn managers, it's landowners, et cetera, that you're educating and working on. And then it really is that community. And so, for us, we wouldn't be able to do this without the community and the elected officials. And so that's where I would start, is communicating what you intend to do. I think there's a tendency to, and I did this myself, lots of, first entries in the summer at scale, because I could do it and flexing my muscles. Looking back, I should have waited and done a quiet winter burn or two so people can see the process. This is a game of prediction. And so that's what I like to awe them with, is like, this is what's going to happen on this burn. And then do the burn, and they see that what I said is going to happen happened. So it's the magic of studying something well, making good predictions, and then following through on those, because that sets you up for your next ask, right? So I think it's thinking about the audiences and spending that time with the commissioners to get there.
Definitely, definitely. Again, I encourage anyone in the chat, if there is any last questions you have for Glenn, please fire away. But I can't tell you, Glenn, how much I appreciate you sharing your time with us and your expertise and your experience with us. It blows my mind. I can't even imagine, because you send out notification of a potential burn and our PBA list, and it feels like there's a million factors going into it. But when like you said, your notification list, you're including HOAs, you're including every municipality group, and in the mix. It's just astounding, and how much really goes into it. So very, very
Yeah,
impressive, and thank you.
yeah, and I'll say, like, the big thing is to always get better, right? So you're going to miss things. And so I describe my notification system as iterative. This is my best guess. It's defendable. So when somebody says, I didn't hear about it, hey, sorry, I'll add you. And so I think that's the most important thing as far as being a burn manager, is doing your after action reviews, your debriefings, from people at all levels of your organization, and then taking that information and using it to make positive change in your program.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we look to wrap this up, let's see. Oh, actually, good. We have another question. This one is, are you getting any kickback on public health impacts from residents and or public health officials?
We do get some of that. So Austin is in we're close to an attainment county, so or a non-attainment county, right? So if you're in a dense area that is non-attainment, then there's additional pollution control rules, and so we're right on the edge. So we're working really hard at all government levels to keep us down, and we've managed to miss it multiple years or decade now. Even with our growth, we keep our emissions down. So we do have air quality regulators that are asking us all the time about it. There's a lot of good information. Like the amount of smoke we produce is negligible compared to what's produced by, even recreational boat traffic. I did some quick analysis once, and our smoke production was the same as recreational boat traffic on the lakes. So we're doing something good with that smoke at least. But yeah, we're really active on trying to communicate that. One of the things I do recommend is understanding AirNow and where the monitors are. So the monitoring stations are identified online. And so if you know where those are, that can be helpful in your prescribed fire planning, because that's what they're using to determine when they hit the thresholds. And so if you can avoid sensors, particularly on poor air quality days, you won't kick those up to where they start ticking in attainment. So one of those things we do now, we don't burn on ozone action days. We give them those days. And then we're much more conscious about AirNow and that communication.
That's a great point. A couple more quick questions. Michael asked, is fire size a factor in that? I think Michael, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you're referencing the smoke outputs, the different levels.
Yeah, and keeping you a non-attainment, county. You said you're keeping your fire sizes down just because you want to keep your smoke down, but has that played into your EPA evaluation of the whole thing at all yet?
No, that is really kind of more an operational thing. I'd rather burn smaller units more frequently and avoid the smoke issues. The attainment's driven really by those monitors and what they collect. And if they hit over a threshold, then it starts triggering, conversations for the health quality. So I think it could be fire size, but I think its direction is a big part of it. So I know they were really worried about a day we were going to burn, because they came out with an ozone action day the morning of our project. And I was like, I got 10 grand in people coming. Like, I can't cancel this thing. And part of the reason I could make that statement was because I knew we weren't going to hit any receptors, right? So they weren't going to get dinged as exceeding the limits, So that's kind of part of what it is. So again, it's knowing where the receptors are is really helpful.
So knowing where the sensors are, you can kind of game the system.
It's helpful, yeah. I mean, they've got a lot of them, but it is publicly available knowledge, and I'll take advantage of it. But I do say they have an important role, and I have kids, and I want my kids to have good, clean air. So, we always have to remember there's reasons for these things.
Definitely. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, but please, if I missed one, let me know. But again, yeah, a huge thank you to Glenn and Jason, and then everyone who attended the webinar. I'm really, really happy with the conversations, where we went. And again, everything has been recorded, and so we are going to post this on YouTube. It'll probably be up tomorrow. And then I will also send out a follow-up email just with some of those links that Glenn had to different resources, different articles, publications, things or resources for y'all to look at. But again, thank you to both our guest speakers and to everyone for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome.
Get out there and burn.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Take care, everyone.
All right. Thanks, David.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Talk soon.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
You too.